Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all here. So last week, we started talking about I guess it was the week before, we started talking about the precepts. The precepts associated with the Soto Zen Buddhist tradition. And in particular, what are sometimes called the grave precepts or the prohibitory precepts. And last week we talked about the first of those moral codes or guidelines for behavior. First really outlined, as far as we know, in the Brahmanet Sutra. And the first one was about killing. The second one is kind of an extension of the first one, since the first one is about stealing life from other beings. The second one is about stealing other things, possessions. It could be material goods. You could think of it in terms of stealing ideas or words. Of course, we consider a lot of that sort of to be, as we say, in the commons. Where do our ideas and words come from, but from other people? There are very few truly novel ideas out there. We can also think in terms of stealing enthusiasm or joy by, for instance, making a sarcastic remark. Or there are other ways of stealing. If, for instance, someone buys a business with the intent of shutting it down and selling off the assets, putting the employees out of work, is that stealing livelihood? It's perfectly legal. But is it stealing? As Woody Guthrie said in his song, some will rob you with a 6-gun and others with a ballpoint pen, or a fountain pen, I guess is what he used. So not far from here, there's a historical marker from where I'm sitting right now. Actually, it's a stone's throw from our backyard. A historical marker. It marks the location of one of the first of Daniel Boone's abodes in this area. It was this rough cabin. Later, he moved to a larger house in St. Charles County, but initially he had a rough log cabin with a stone chimney that he built in 1799. So St. Louis was established about 50 years earlier than that, but on the marker it says it's one of the first cabins or homes of a white man in Indian territory. Because of course the Miami and the Osage, and the Sioux and the Iroquois had occupied these lands for thousands of years before Daniel Boone arrived. And Daniel Boone was, of course, the first of many, and then gradually the land became parceled out and sold legally among those who had the power to make the laws. There was an article in the New Yorker not long ago about the history of the commons in England, the disappearance of the commons, and how about 1,000 years ago, it started getting divided up. Initially, there would be a number of people who would use farmlands collectively for grazing their animals or for growing crops. And then when people with the power to do so passed laws, boundaries started appearing and fences and enclosures, and the commons disappeared, so that hunting became poaching and gleaning became trespassing. So there are, Dogen quite succinctly states this precept in his fascicle on the precepts as not to steal. But in the West, other centers have found other ways of expressing this particular precept. And I'll just give you a sampling of some of that. First of all, starting with the Brahmanet Sutra. Now, this was, again, the first, as we know, collection of these 10 prohibitory precepts. And in the Brahmanet Sutra, which was probably composed around 500 CE or a little before, it stated, a disciple of the Buddha must not himself steal or encourage others to steal by expedient means, and steal by means of incantation or deviant mantras. One should not create the causes, conditions, methods, or karma of stealing, no valuables of possessions, even those belonging to ghosts and spirits, or thieves and robbers, be they as small as a needle or a blade of grass, may be stolen. So Dogen summarized that as not to steal. At the San Francisco Zen Center, pardon me, they state that precept as not to take what is not given. At Zen Mountain Monastery in the Catskills, they phrase it this way: be giving, do not steal, alluding to the fact that stealing arises from greed, and the traditional antidote for greed is giving, dana. So they state the precept positively first. At Bright Way Zen Center in Portland, they say, do not steal, honor the gift not yet given. an interesting twist on saying not to take what is not given, honor the gift not yet given. Everyday Zen, which is led by Norman Fisher in California. The precept is stated not to steal, but to receive what is offered as a gift, encouraging a sense of gratitude for what one receives. Zen Peacemakers, an international organization that is centered in New York City, they state the precept as being satisfied with what I have. This is the precept of non-stealing. Kind of taking a look back at the precursors of theft or stealing, which is dissatisfaction with what one has and a desire for something more. So they emphasize cultivating appreciation and satisfaction with what one has. And in commentaries on this precept, an early one attributed to Bodhidharma, self-nature is subtle and mysterious. In the realm of the unattainable Dharma, not having thoughts of gaining is called the precept of not stealing. Not having thoughts of gaining. Kind of similar in some ways to the way the Zen peacemakers stated the precept. And finally, in a commentary by Master Dogen, the self and things of the world are just as they are. The gate of emancipation is open, as if what you really want is readily available at all times. What is there to steal? So we've talked in the past about how this notion of ownership and this possessive mind that we have is really illusory. What do we really own? As the Buddha said, not me, not mine, not what I am, referring to essentially everything. Form, feeling, perceptions, fabrications, and consciousness. So that not even the body, the notion of even owning one's body is a little strange. It comes to us as a gift, in a sense, whether we want it or not, from the universe through our parents. So if this notion of ownership or possession is indeed an illusion, what's this about stealing? How can you steal anything if no one owns anything? But The Buddha was a practical person, and he realized we live in a world of social convention. And even monks and nuns have robes and bowls. And he realized that if one that didn't respect the fact that a bowl was someone else's and just took it, that it would create discord, disharmony, anger, and suffering. So in this conventional world in which we live, there are possessions. And the Buddha encourages us to respect those boundaries. But also be aware that everything that we think we have is on short-term lease during this brief lifetime. And everything that we think we have comes with a responsibility to take care of it, to treat it so it can be passed on or responsibly disposed of. So there's a little story that I'll end with. An odd little story, as many Zen stories are, about stealing. It actually takes in other topics as well, but at least on the surface, it's about stealing. And there is a backstory. The two characters in this are Zhao Zhu, a very esteemed Zen master, Chan master, in the 9th century Tang dynasty of China, and an older woman. And this story occurs after the great persecution of Buddhists that occurred during the reign of Emperor Wuzong. Emperor Wuzong was interested in eradicating foreign elements from China, which would include Buddhism. It also included the Uyghurs. There's a long history of China, the Hans in China and the Uyghurs. And this goes back over 1,000 years. So the emperor had executed a war on the Uyghurs, which had depleted the resources of the country. And people were falling into poverty and was creating problems. So he attacked the monasteries, the Buddhist monasteries, also a part of this sort of xenophobic mentality, and stole the resources from the monasteries, which were considerable at the time because Buddhism flourished in the earlier Tang dynasty. And many of the monks and nuns had fled and become lay people, including this older woman. So this older woman and Zhao Zhu actually knew one another. So the story starts this way. Zhao Zhu was out sort of walking the grounds of the monastery. It was one of the monasteries that didn't get shut down during that time. And the woman was coming up the road, and Zhao Zu said, "Where are you going?" And the woman said, I'm going to steal Zhao Zu's bamboo sprouts. I'm on my way to steal some sprouts from Zhao Zu." And Zhao Zu said, "Well, what if you encounter Zhao Zu?" And the old woman slapped him. And as the story is stated, Zhao Zu stopped. Stopped what? Considering that the two knew one another, it gives kind of a comical spin on the story, as if they were having almost a flirtatious encounter, but referring to the precept that they were both aware of stealing. And how the woman, probably in times of need, was going up to the monastery to get some food. So I think I'll stop there. I guess with some questions. What can be stolen? And what have we already stolen? And how can you achieve any kind of purity with this precept? How do you practice with it? So thank you. Thank you for listening. And we'll stop now and break up into groups.